Definitely.
You got there first, Jack. So welcome to our final event of the Love Tutoring Festival 2021. We have had a pretty full-on week. We've had an incredibly eye-opening week, and we've learned a great deal from the speakers that we've had over the past 5 days. It is 5:16 p.m. Friday the 2nd of July, and for the next hour, we will be speaking to Jessie Pitsillides and the group of panelists that she has brought together to discuss this topic title, which is a gratitude circle with current student tutors and what they've learned about being tutors and mentors themselves. So Jessie is the founder of Mentor Junior, which was an organization that was established during lockdown as a way to facilitate peer-to-peer learning. Jessie mobilized her team of peers, including many of the panelists that we have this evening, to volunteer tutoring to primary aged students. And since then, Mentor Junior has gone from strength to strength, adding music lessons and a focus on mental health and well-being. And Jessie was just saying there that it has plans to open up a kind of debating team within the framework of Mentor Junior. So what better way to end the festival? And I will now hand over to Jessie to lead this discussion on students, tutors who are current student tutors.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Ludo. We're all very excited to be here. And I'm also very excited to be joined by these 5 wonderful people who are part of the Mentor Junior family, many of which will also be kind of helping manage the team next year, which is great. And yeah, so we're really excited to be doing this gratitude circle because I think it is really, a wonderful opportunity to be reflective about kind of, the gifts that our teachers have given us that we as students are able to kind of pass on to our own tutees. And so what the structure of this will be asking some questions to do with peer-to-peer learning, and we'll hopefully be able to go into some kind of breakout room so that everyone can have a chance to discuss some of the interesting points that are raised. So why don't we kick off with an important point about reciprocal learning. So what can tutoring a student teach us as the tutor? Kai, do you want to start off?
Yeah, so throughout my time in tutoring, one of the main things I've learned is by tutoring different people, we can learn a lot about different methods of learning and the different methods that suit different people. And from that can actually help ourselves in us learning. So obviously at Mentor Junior, the majority of us are quite young. We're still learning, be it at school or university. So a lot of the kind of teaching I've done, I've had to research on how to teach, and now you are using some of those methods to teach myself. I'd also say organization. So in preparing for lessons and tutoring periods, it's definitely helped me with my organization, which again, I can use myself. And finally, also just it really helps develop a sympathy for your own teachers. Yeah, so as I said, again, like most of us are still being taught regularly. And so I think that's something that's quite important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really like that last point as well. I think that sympathy is such an important kind of tool in learning how to, ask the right questions and learning how to ask them as well. Awesome. Regine, would you like to add to any of that?
Sure, yeah, I completely agree with Kai. But I also think that through tutoring, I've really learned the importance of listening. I think it's easy to fall into a trap of believing that as a teacher or a tutor, you must fulfill that role of being the one who's doing all of the talking, with your student being the one who listens. But through teaching, I've in fact learned that listening is a really important skill. And so I've tried to incorporate that more into kind of the way that I approach tutoring. So in my sessions, we always have 5 or 10 minutes of time at the end to discuss anything that's kind of sparked the students' interest since the last session, with the only rule being that it has to relate to the subject in some way. And this often serves as an opportunity to kind of identify where the students' interests lie and pick up on their thought processes, and as Kai was saying, their way of learning, their way of thinking. And I found that just incorporating the simple act of just listening more makes such a difference in the level of engagement in lessons.
That's such a lovely answer. And I think that that like applies so well to learning context, but also the wider kind of sense of just, making, and building relationships with people. So it's a really lovely answer. And finally, Soraya, do you have anything to add to reciprocal learning?
I mean, I think much as has already been said. It's kind of like, I think we can all agree that everyone learns things in completely different ways. Everyone approaches like school or academics or just problems in everyday life in completely different ways, but everyone has their own set way. Mm-hmm. And I know that by tutoring, I've kind of seen different ways to approach things that I might not have ever thought of. And so even though it doesn't apply, as in it's not the same like subject or it's not the same material if they're a younger student, you can incorporate those ways of approaching problems into your own learning. And say for like A levels, and I assume university, it's much more out of the box thinking, in the sense that no subject can you approach everything in the same way. And so when you you can still learn all these techniques even though they're younger students and they have completely different like syllabuses and stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. It really does help with your kind of own learning and kind of filling in those, little grains of sand that might be missing in your like tower or sandcastle, whatever metaphor we'll be using. And I think this is a great point for discussion. So I'm not sure the technicalities of how this will work, Ludo, but do you think now would be a good time for a breakout room to discuss what tutoring as a student teaches you, or should we have some audience feedback maybe?
We could certainly go into breakout rooms, but perhaps a group discussion would be a better use of the time. So what would the topic of kind of the discussion be?
Yeah, so I just think what tutoring as a student teaches you, and I appreciate that many people in the audience won't be students, but I don't know if there's anything that they'd like to add to that.
I might step in here, if that's all right. I think that, and these might be points that our panelists come on to a little bit later on, but I think that being able to see, being a student now, and being able to see what it means to have an educator ahead of you, being able to see that respect and relationship drive better learning, being able to see that now while you're still a student will mean that come your university days or your apprenticeship days or going straight into a job where you need to form those relationships of learning, I think for you guys that will make that so much easier, and for kind of the whole Mentor Junior team, even those who aren't able to join us, being able to see the power of that relationship building now and living that in your sessions, your mentoring sessions with your students, will make you far more appreciative of having mentors and educators yourselves, which you undoubtedly will have as you progress in your career, in your life. I mean, we've heard from, especially on the Tuesday of this festival, the Business of Tutoring Day, that there were, that there were 10, 15 different individuals in the sessions throughout that day who were, who'd had 20, 30 years of experience in business and education, and who still had mentors themselves, because we never stop needing mentors and educators, and we never stop learning from people who have more experience than us. So not only are you learning those things there, but the students that you're working with now, as I'm sure you've kind of built into the programs that you have, the students that you're mentoring now will hopefully become the mentors and educators of the next round of Mentor Junior, or of the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. So what you're doing is creating that kind of virtuous learning cycle, and that's something that I wish I'd had a little more of at school. I think it would have probably accelerated how quickly I understood that relationship, because it took me a few more years probably to understand that. But yeah, I think that's a pretty huge part of being a young mentor, is seeing how that mentoring relationship works as you progress.
Definitely, I totally agree, and I think there's something so hopeful in that notion that being a tutor so young teaches you the importance of becoming a lifelong learner, and it kind of keeps making you want to ask those questions that even as you said, maybe 40 years down the line, you'll still have your own mentor it's a lovely thing to add to the discussion. And I think that leads us very nicely into our next kind of point to discuss, which is what skills you can pick up from being a tutor. Karis, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think there's tons of skills you can pick up from being a tutor, but I think a key one is probably communication. Mm-hmm. I think that's because when you're talking with, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 8-year-olds, whatever, you have to be very clear in what you say, and you have to make sure that they understand what you say. And you have to be able to reword it if you've said it in a way that they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so key in everything you do, because, in life, a lot of problems just come from miscommunication, and you kind of want to make that clear. And so if you start off from an early age trying to learn how to, make sure it's very clear what you're saying and how to articulate well, then that's very useful. Another one I'd say is I've often found that tutoring is sort of a lesson in humility, because when you're a teacher, you kind of feel this urge to know everything. But when they ask you a question, you want to be able to give them an answer straight away. But what I find is best is letting them know that I don't know everything, because then that makes them feel more comfortable that they don't know everything, and they feel more comfortable asking questions. And for me, sort of being on this side of that, not knowing everything and really wanting them to ask me as many questions, no matter how stupid they think it is, because there's no such thing as a stupid question. You want them to sort of ask them questions. That's made me more confident when I have a problem and I want to ask a question. I think, well, if I was the teacher, I'd rather someone ask me the question. So it's made me less afraid to sort of, look stupid or whatever, because you don't actually look stupid, you just look curious. And I think in trying to instill that in the people I tutor, I've kind of instilled that myself as well. And I think that's a very useful skill to have, is not wanting to always appear, flawless.
Yeah, I think that's such a profound answer. And I really love what you said, like, you don't look stupid, you just look curious. I think that's such a lovely way of reframing it. And actually, just for some context, Karis has the ultimate task in communication as a tutor. She teaches, do you want to tell everyone who you teach and what you teach?
So I teach a boy in Romania. So that's a little tricky to start off with, because obviously English is his second language, and unfortunately I don't know Romanian. But what we do is basically he's working quite a bit above his age limit, and so I have to be quickly adapting to whatever he wants, because he's so curious about everything. I started off teaching him chemistry, but then he got interested in physics, so we did some physics, and now we're doing some coding. So it's always making clear that what I'm saying is obviously clear and it's getting through to him. Because sometimes when you're a kid, you want to just be like, yeah, I understand what that is, when you don't understand at all. So sometimes I'll have to stop and be like, go back to what do you understand? What don't you understand? We'll do this slowly. If I've gone too fast, I say, so I'm sorry, that's on me. I make it very clear that if they don't understand it, that's sort of on me, so they don't feel sort of demoralized if they can't understand what you're saying. I think that's very key, because the more demoralized you get, the less like you are to admit not understanding. And then, then they won't understand anything at all, because they won't be able to go through and ask those questions and learn more.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that as Jack kind of put in the chat, it is really just creating that safe space so that they know that, they both, the tutee and the tutor, can have that kind of humility and admit when it's wrong without ever feeling judged. I mean, that would be the worst thing ever. That wouldn't, that would be great. Awesome. And Moz, do you have, what skills do you believe you pick up from being a tutor?
Yeah, I mean, apart from what was already mentioned, I think especially with an organization like Mentor Junior, where I'm teaching different people week after week, it really does sort of boost confidence and interpersonal skills, because you begin to open up. I remember when I first began to mentor, I was very sort of conserved with what I was doing. And, maybe by my third or fourth week, I was a lot more comfortable interacting with new people, having sort of sidetracked conversations, which I think are quite fun, but as long as you can bring it back, really. It's also about leadership. You develop a lot of valuable leadership skills as you're like sort of the person who's leading the lesson instead of the one being led, as it's more, as students, as we're more used to. So, the student, the person you are tutoring, they're more dependent on you to sort of give them information and, feed into their questions and, feed into their knowledge. And so it's it's a lot more sort of leadership based than what I'm used to personally. But it's a good thing, you know, stepping outside your circle. I think it's a great thing. In regards to, you know, academic sort of skills, like, you know, when you teach a subject, you learn from it also, because when they ask you questions and stuff, it just sort of forces you to search into your knowledge of that subject. And, you know, you can also, and obviously you're increasing your knowledge or your memory of the subject at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that kind of links to like what Soraya was saying with her like A-level revision. It really teaches you so many things. I think that's a great answer. And it could be an interesting point to jump into some audience feedback on the skills that people find they gain from being a tutor. So yeah, if anyone has anything they'd like to add, please share.
I think you learn very quickly that that you have to stick to your job sometimes. So I think what I mean by that is, you know, there's only so much that you can accomplish, and you go in thinking, you know, I'm gonna fix all of these everythings, but actually with 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week, you know, there's a limit to how much you can physically accomplish in that time. But every little tiny step and development that you make is a massive achievement. So having to adjust to that is quite a step sometimes, depending on the kinds of students you're working with.
I agree. And I think it's quite interesting, particularly in the context of Mentor Junior, because we kind of have two sides of tutoring. There's your kind of, you know, quick tutoring where you have like, you know, different kids every week, like Moz was describing. And then other tutors like Karis have, you know, weekly sessions. So as kind of Jack added, you have to have that adaptability depending on what kind of, you know, goals you achieve, whether your time scale is an hour or 12 months, which is, yeah. And Ludo, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think one thing I've learned over the 5 or 6 years I've been a tutor is that little by little you realize that your public speaking skills are actually greatly improved by being a tutor. And I think that that's a fairly underrated point, because I don't just mean public speaking as in, you know, giving speeches and kind of being able to you know, deliver addresses in front of big rooms. I just mean the ability to talk in front of others, which is something that we do every single day. It's something that, you know, every single speaker who's turned themselves off mute and jumped in this festival has done. And it's something that we do in meetings and classes and sessions, you know, every single day. And, you know, as a tutor, you might find that you're delivering a piece of content, and especially online, you know, it's very often that a student doesn't want to talk, so they don't say anything for 10 minutes. And you have to kind of just keep going yourself as a tutor, because that's part of your responsibility, is to keep up the kind of momentum and the kind of the pace of the session. And I think that's something that, yeah, as I said, comes to your realization gradually. But you know, you are almost performing as a student, as a tutor, or as a mentor, and you do it every single time you do a session, even if just for a couple of minutes. And as you build that up, you get much more confident in doing that, and you get much more able to react to how your students' mood, what your students' mood is in that particular time, even just within a single session. You become better at, you know, starting with a bang at the start of the session, and then relaxing things towards the middle of a session if the student's feeling a little tired, and then ending with a bit more of a kind of positive or encouraging, almost like a positive or encouraging speech. So I think, you know, if we are to be building leaders in the future generations, then understanding how to speak in front of people is a huge part of that. And I would say that's certainly a skill that I've learned. I don't know if that's an academic skill or a soft skill or what kind of skill that is, but hopefully it's a skill.
Definitely. And I think that's something that I hadn't really ever thought about before, but it is so true. And particularly paired with what Virgin's kind of started us off with it helping you become a better listener. I mean, it's, you know, it's an all-rounder there, better speaker, better listener. What more could we want as tutors? But yeah, does anyone else from the audience have anything they'd like to add about the skills that we can obtain? Or if not, we have lots consider, jump right to those as well. So the third question we have is, what has peer-to-peer learning taught you about how tutoring can work effectively in schools? Soraya, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So my older brother is dyspraxic, but they never found out, or like we never found out until he was about like 11. So that's quite late on. And I think what that really shows, and what I'm sure everyone can confirm, is that the British school system doesn't work for everyone. I mean, no school system in the world works for every single student. And so, because until we found out he was dyspraxic, there was no way to like cater to the problems he was having at school, like slow processing and everything. And so since I've seen that growing up, I think seeing that tutoring can help in a situation where the teacher obviously can't always adapt to one specific student struggling in one way and another student struggling another way, the fact that people who happen to be lucky and able to fit the British system or whatever school system they're in can then transfer their knowledge onto the other student. And it's probably easier for someone our age to help someone else our age than it is for a teacher to understand the way that someone our age is feeling about it all. And I think it really is just that the system doesn't cater to everyone, and so adapting it through the students to help the other students is just like something all schools should do. Because at my school we have an academic mentoring system where students help other younger students or of the same age in any subject, and I've really seen that like help give both confidence to the people who the system obviously doesn't suit, and just kind of have the tutor work as a translator between the teachers in the classroom and the student who's struggling.
Yeah, I think it's a great kind of, personal story to add to that, in the sense that, in most schools, the ratio of students to teachers, means that it's much more likely that a student will have something in common with someone struggling than a teacher will. So we shouldn't just kind of disregard students as kind of, these amazing resources and mentors that can help people that are going through similar issues, and not just kind of rely on teachers for that support. And yeah, no, that was a really excellent point. Kai, do you have anything to add to what Soraya's mentioned?
Yeah, so obviously within the last questions, we've kind of talked about how different people will learn differently, but I also think that, well, through my time in tutoring, I've learned that actually different subjects need quite different approaches to being taught. And I think that tutoring is a method of teaching that fits some subjects a lot better than classroom style learning. So, for example, I find that sciences can be taught much more effectively in a classroom than, say, languages, where people seem to kind of be held up on different things, as opposed to in like STEM subjects where you kind of see similarities in what people struggle in. Also, kind of just to add to Soraya's point, with the one size fits all system not really being suitable, yeah, I really agree with that. And I think that one kind of aspect of that, which is really different for different people, is the pace of learning. Obviously, method is also really important, but just some people learning a lot slower or faster, not necessarily worse, but that I just find is another important point.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even just the method of kind of assessing aptitude is so strange. Like, I think, it's how, how like Churchill describes democracy is like, it's the least worst option. It's kind of, one test for everyone is kind of the least worst option in a way. I think that one thing that my school offers that's amazing, it's called the International Baccalaureate, and you can choose either A levels or the International Baccalaureate, which is a lot more coursework driven. So it kind of, helps to, put a jig in that, one size fits all thing. But yeah, no, I think that, peer-to-peer tutoring can absolutely serve to to really facilitate learning and be much more, for the learning to be much more personalized as well, which is so important. I think another thing that we often speak about when we're training as tutors is that friendly boundary, and trying to tread that very lightly. And I think that in a school context, because you are just a mentor and not a professional tutor, being a friend is totally okay. And it just means that you can be way more open about the pitfalls, about what you wish you knew when you were learning it, about if both of you aren't particularly into the subject, you can just be like, this is the way to get the marks. And I think there are so many kind of social bonuses to being a peer tutor in a school context. And that kind of leads us into our fourth and final question, which is, what would you say to yourself 5 years ago if you'd been working with a tutor? Karis, would you like to start us off?
I think from my tutoring experience, what I would have done would I would have worked on the pressure points. And by that, I mean the bits that when you're tutoring, it both as the tutor and the tutee, it can be very tempting to just do the stuff and to just, because then you feel good about yourself, you've done it easy, it's great. But the problem with that is you don't really get anywhere. You just do your long division and you're like, there you go, I'm perfect. But what I would have liked, I think, a bit more if I was working with a tutor when I was that age, is for someone to say, no, we're going to sit down and we know this is a problem. You're not meant to get it straight away. Because obviously if you say, do this and they can't do that, that's going to be very bad for someone's self-esteem. But you want to be like, this is a problem. We know, especially with the boy I tutor, a lot of the times he has found other stuff quite easy to learn. And so when he hits something that he doesn't find easy to learn, he kind of shuts down. And that's sort of what I like to work on with him. And I think I kind of see that bit in myself, whereas sometimes when I was going from primary school to secondary school, obviously it's a little bit of a jump up. And then suddenly it's not just times tables now, it's like algebra and whatnot. And so you suddenly want to go, well, I can't do this. Everything else I've been able to do, I can't do this. And at whatever stage you are when you do that, I think it could be so easy to just shut off. So I think if we instill in people, from a very young age, that, you are going to have stuff you don't know, even if you've understood everything up to this point, and you just got to keep looking at it and you just got to keep working on it. And I kind of wish that had been pushed on me a bit more at a younger age, so that when I did get into secondary school with the learning, sort of this adapting to things that were more difficult came a lot easier to me. And that's what I try and do with the boy I tutor, is try and say, you're not meant to get it straight away. That's completely fine. But we can't just leave it. We have to push through this rather than just be like going to something else.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and such great advice as well to kind of anyone that's in any learning context, because I think it is particularly difficult, especially for these kids. I think your tutee, he's homeschooled, right? It's quite hard for them to, I don't know, get that more generic feedback ever. So yeah, that's a great point about adaptability. Rojan, what would you have said to yourself 5 years ago if you've been working with a tutor?
I think a few things. I think to start off with, I'd bring back Karis's point from before about no question being a stupid question. And I think that kind of mindset of wanting to appear intelligent and to not have kind of any flaws or gaps in your knowledge can really actually hold you back when it comes to your learning. And then I think another point would just be to really enjoy learning. I think finding that genuine interest and engaging in interesting conversation with someone who is kind of teaching you the subject can be such a great way to just gain a deeper appreciation, not only for the subject you're studying, but for kind of the act of learning itself. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great point. And Moz, what would you have said to yourself?
To be fair, 5 years ago, I'm pretty sure I was preparing for my 11 plus, so I was working with tutors at the time. And what I would tell myself over anything really would be to, again, like was previously said, to sort of attempt the work no matter how hard it is. Because one thing I've realized when it comes to being a tutor, when you pick work, you sort of pick it. So it's decently difficult, but it's not something that's outside of their abilities, but it will still encourage them to think. And I think that that's important. And I remember when I used to, when I was working with my tutor, if I saw a hard problem, I would literally I was shut down. Like I wasn't, but then, working with a tutor, sort of building, when I answered one hard question, I would think to myself, yeah, I can do this. And, it's about building that confidence and fluency. And, that's probably one of the big things that I kept in mind when I became a student tutor, to always encourage people, always provide sort of a safe space to make mistakes, because that's what learning is about, isn't it? It's mistakes are portals of discovery, and it's really important. So, and another thing, I know this is really funny, but you have to focus on what they're telling you. It sounds obvious, but when you sit as a tutor, you can tell that when people aren't focusing, and it makes itself clear. And even what I do in my lessons is sort of, I'll give them the work, they'll do the work, and I'll say, if they're lacking, or if they're sort of falling behind, if they're not concentrating, I'll say, do this work, then we'll do something fun at the end. So it's sort of I like to push the message that hard work reaps rewards, and so it's sort of like that sort of mentality, really.
Yeah, that's such a lovely answer, packed with so many wonderful things. I think we could see on the chat here that mistakes are portals of discovery is such a wonderful way to look at it, because it's so true. It's only when you get things wrong that then you kind of remember how you work through that error. And I think I still remember, like, the questions I got wrong on my like GCSE mocks. Like, that's kind of the type of things that hammer home. And yeah, to be fair, if I were speaking to myself 5 years ago, I'd probably say to, because I think when you're working with someone one-on-one, it's very easy to want to impress them all the time. And, kind of, you don't want to fess up that you're like really not understanding something. And it's just being open enough as a tutor to like let your tutee know that they can tell you that they're struggling or not being able to, work through something. So I think that, yeah, as Karis mentioned earlier, creating that safe space is so important. And yeah, I think that those are all the questions we've had for our panelists. But would anyone from the audience like to add to the discussion of what they wish they could have told themselves when they were learning or as students?
I think it's quite a common one, really, but I think that certainly in my school environment, learning was not hugely, my secondary school environment, learning was not hugely it wasn't a massive part of my school ethos, to put it in the most kind of PC way. And I think it probably, ironically, it did make me a more committed learner, probably off the back of that, because I had to kind of work through how tricky it was to get down and study, amongst my group of friends and my classmates. But I think it's not a kind of learning environment that I would encourage. I still think one in which people are kind of pushing each other the whole time is still the way in which we learn best, which is kind of part of what you are able to do as a tutor or as a mentor, isn't it? It's that kind of that idea that Mary Myatt talked about, which is this kind of high challenge, low threat style of tutoring, which some of you panelists I'm sure have heard before, some of you may not have. This idea that that children want to be challenged, students want to be challenged. So breezing through a session, much like my classmates at school used to breeze through lessons and not concentrate at all, that is not really, that's not what children, we can't say across the board because there are exceptions, but generally children want to be challenged. That's part of what helps them cognitively to grow. So as long as you kind of are able to keep that idea of high challenge but low threat, i.e. not making it something that they feel that they can't get wrong, or that there will be great kind of injustices if they do get it wrong. That's something that I would have liked to have told myself 5 years ago when I was a tutor, but 10 years ago when I was a student, I would like to have kind of known that, or known at least that my teachers would have been thinking that, which I'm sure there's no disservice to them, but I'm sure they weren't. But I'd actually like to put a question back to you panelists, if that's all right. I'd like to flip the switch here a little bit. And I'd like to ask, do you genuinely feel like after a year, just over a year of working with students in your schools, do you think that it's helped to build your relationships with other students in your school, whether they're students in your year or students in the years below? Do you feel it's genuinely helped you to build relationships?
Yeah, I do. Who wants to start us off?
I can. I think it's really helped me with just gaining a different perspective on a lot of things. I think within my school, I think there are a lot of positions of responsibility that are offered to students. So you'll often find yourself kind of being responsible for or leading a group of people who are in your own year, and kind of accepting that that people work and learn in different ways, and that people respond to different things, and the importance of positive feedback and reinforcement, I think, has just really helped me overall in being a better leader and just a better kind of a friend to my peers.
Definitely. Karis, I think you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, well, I would agree entirely that it really helps you with your peers and sort of understanding that they do differently. I think also I think a lot of the time when you're at school, it's like your year, those are your people. And then the years above, you're sort of they're there. And I think the older you get, the less so that is, the less separated you feel. But I feel like definitely when you're at the beginning of the school, it's like you and then these other people that are people, but they don't really register. But I think when you work so closely with someone, especially when there's a large age gap, and you see, so my tutor is 10 years old, and a lot of the time before, I just think, oh, it's a 10-year-old running around a playground or whatever, and you don't really register them as, oh, this is going to sound really bad, but sometimes you don't register them as people because they're just so separate from you. Like, obviously they are, but sometimes it's so hard because obviously I don't know if it's like our brains or whatever, but we like to think, okay, we understand these people, we get them, and then you distance yourself from other people. But I feel like doing that, sort of being able to talk to this boy and talk to him and seeing what he thinks, and knowing that even though he's young, he still has very interesting opinions about the world, and he's so curious, and I always admire how curious he is, because that's my favorite thing about tutoring, is that they're always so curious. But I think, so I think as a way, it makes you make these connections that on the other hand, on any other situation, you probably wouldn't have done. You don't really go up to a 10-year-old and hang out with them on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's been really fun, and it also makes me feel more comfortable. Maybe if I saw someone older than me and I thought, oh well, they've done something that I want to do, it make me feel comfortable being like, oh, I can see if I could talk to them or ask them a question, because I know that there's sort of like there's less distance between people than you think there is, would be sort of how I'd summarize that.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point, and then I totally agree. I think that kind of leads into what perhaps I would say to kind of answer that question, which is that when as a tutor, I think you need to find loads of different ways of explaining one thing. And with your friends, I think now all of us, we're at this really exciting stage in our life where we're all kind of finding our own really niche interests. Like, for me, it might be, cryptography. For Karis, it might be something really niche in physics that I'm not, going to go near. But you have to find ways to, connect with your peers and, explain these concepts that really excite you when, you're interested in completely different things. And I think that that's a lovely, way of building, relationships with people that are your own age, just through learning the art of explanation, I guess. Soraya, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think to build a bit on what Karis is saying, I think it's kind of helped me interact with people my own age by like teaching people that are that much younger, because I still think we have a lot to learn from people that are young. Yeah. We've kind of forgotten the simplicity of everything, and we've overcomplicated so many things in our own like communication at our age already. And I just think when you're made to like break something down, like not just academically but just in general, when you're made to break something down in your communication with someone who's so much younger, it kind of shows you that everything that you do to complicate it when you talk to people your own age is just so unnecessary. And really, you can, like, a lot of the same things apply whether you're like 7 or 8 or you're 17 or 18, you know. So I think that it actually has really helped in my interactions with people both my own age and younger or older.
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome answer. And I remember my mom would always say the thing to me that, like, the smartest and most likable people can make the most complicated topics feel like, you know, a Biff and Chip book. And it's such a, like, you know, amazing way to communicate with people. And yeah, I think there is a lot to learn from, you know, people that are younger than us. And as you know, I think all of us, you know, as we grow older and we become older tutors as well, I think it'll be nice to look back on the experiences we had as, you know, teen tutors as well. Yeah, would anyone else like to add anything more? Kai, Moz? No? Anyone from the audience as well?
I would just like to tell you how buzzed I am that you guys are doing what you're doing. I think it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You know, genuinely, I think it's so exciting that you've seen a need and you've done something about it. And I think it really just, it's so amazing to end the week with you guys as a reminder that, you know, direct action works. You know, if there's a problem, we can solve it. So I just am amazed by you guys, and I think you all speak so eloquently about education, and that's probably because you experience it, you know, day in, day out, and I think that's wonderful. So yeah, thank you for coming more than anything else.
Likewise, thank you for having us. We love what we do and we're really excited to be here.
A lovely little mention from Linda in the chat, who is listening in but is not speaking. I guess she's working or on a train. She says, have to echo that great insight.
Sorry, I was sort of like listening and doing the final bits of Friday admin, but I just wanted to say, absolutely amazing. Do you know, when I saw this event, for some reason I had in my head that these were like university students or like older master's students running the Gratitude Circle. And I've just sort of realized you're all still in school, if I've got that correctly. And I just think the way you're speaking about tutoring, I mean, you guys are really the future of tutoring. And it has been so good just listening in, and, you know, you speak so eloquently and you speak so passionately. And that is so, it's really just really, it's a really positive vibe I'm getting from you guys. And I guess I just wanted to say that it was really impressive, even though I wasn't like right in the Zoom. I could hear the passion just through the discussions that you were having. So thank you so much.
Look at Linda continuing the wider gratitude circle, framing this morning and this evening in one big gratitude circle. I thank you guys for being here. I can't end this without asking, where is Mentor Junior going next? What are the next steps for Mentor Junior?
Yeah, so the next steps include most of these lovely people here. So Kai will be our managing director next year, and Soraya will be our tutoring director. So we're hoping to make it an app to apply for funding so that we can make it a much safer environment, just because currently, as it stands, we have quite a bit of communication going on outside of the platform. We're also hoping to increase the services that we offer. So as you said at the beginning, now we're really, you know, excited to have our music mentoring. We might want to start some, you know, debating clubs. That's kind of what I've been, you know, thinking about today, just so that we can, you know, offer kids the chance of any kind of enrichment they want, whether it's academic, whether it's, you know, more social, or whether it's extracurricular. And yeah, we're really excited about the future.
So there's thumbs up from all of you guys that you're sticking. Even if you're not sticking with Mentor Junior, you guys, some of you, please tell me that you will be at least sticking with mentoring and tutoring. A few nods, that's enough. I'll take that. Well, if there's no more kind of questions to come in or points to make, I would like to end this by paying gratitude to to the 5 of you panelists. As Jack and Linda have said, you speak many, many years ahead of kind of your progress in education, and that is a testament really to you guys. And thank you, Jessie, for agreeing to bring this group together and agreeing to lead this gratitude circle, even though a few weeks ago you had no idea really what a gratitude circle consisted of really. And I kind of asked you to do this without really telling you too much about what it would look like. I think we've done an incredible job of paying gratitude to current student tutors. And hopefully this recording will go far and wide and will spread to your friends and family at schools around the country and over to America. And if what comes of this is that, you know, just one student becomes a tutor and learns the way that you guys have learned, then that will be a success. So thank you, all of you.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is cutting out, but no, thank you so much for having us. We beyond appreciate it. We feel honored to be considered for to close the event of your wonderful festival. And yeah, lovely to see you all.
Very good. Okay, well, all the best of luck in the coming academic years. You guys, some of you moving on to university, you'll be the brightest bunch there. So make sure that you use that for positive means. And as Julia said at the end of the final event, the penultimate event, the next Love Tutoring Festival will be at the end of January 2022. And you know that we are asking you guys to come back. So make sure that you're not off on your gap year or traveling too far and wide, because we'd love you guys to be there again. So thank you all very much. And that'll be the end of the Love Tutoring Festival this year. There's a tear in my eye for this week. It's been amazing. It really has. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Soraya, thank you.